wishes to discuss the review into the expansion of MCAP programme and ministerial licence pathway, whatever that means. Over to you, Deputy.
Can I firstly say that I'm delighted that this topical question has been selected for discussion this evening, and I wish to thank the Cown's Office for facilitating this very important discussion. It's an issue that I'm very passionate about, and I hope to shed a bit of light on what the MCAP means and the ministerial licence. As we all know, the Medical Cannabis Access Programme was established in 2019 as a 5-year pilot scheme. However, the programme has shown limited reach. The data released to me shows that in the first quarter of this year, a mere 53 patients have managed to secure access. Alarmingly, there were 0 enrollees for the first 3 months of this year. I believe since March, a further 2, possibly 4, have managed to enrol. But for a programme that was intended to ensure accessibility for patients, the number, I'm sure the Minister will agree, are stark. In contrast, the ministerial licence, also established in 2019 as an alternative means of obtaining medical cannabis, has witnessed a markedly higher uptake of 319 accepted applications, with 1 accepted in the first quarter of this year. This shows, I believe, that there is a much greater need and demand for which the Medical Cannabis Access Programme currently allows, and must be expanded immediately. The ministerial licence, for example, has its complexities. The HSE states that they commit to reimburse patients for cannabis products obtained via this route, but that is only if prescribed for one of the 3 qualifying medical conditions recognised by the programme. Now, that's a bit of a contradiction in itself that I'll refer to later, but I think it's imperative that I outline those 3 conditions: spasticity associated with multiple sclerosis, intractable nausea and vomiting associated with chemotherapy, and severe refractory epilepsy. Can I just focus on those 3 conditions for a moment? Spasticity, but not patients generally with MS, seems very specific for ensuring access, and I've had patients with MS relay huge frustrations to me about this. Intractable nausea and vomiting associated with chemotherapy, but not cancer patients, again very specific and restrictive. And then we have refractory epilepsy, with the inclusion of the word severe seems unnecessary, as refractory epilepsy already implies that medicines either have not worked or do not work at all to control seizures. So this government, whether they intended or not, ensured access for just those 3 very specific conditions, and I believe at the time we were all optimistic when this programme was first announced. However, 5 years on, it is disappointing that the numbers show just how restrictive it actually is. It is concerning, as all those patients who are accessing the ministerial licence are doing so because they are not eligible for the Medical Cannabis Access Programme pathway and are excluded from applying. The absence of an eligibility criterion for the ministerial licence reflects a broader demand and necessity that exceeds the MCAP provisions, and there is a pressing need for the expansion. I think that's underscored by the higher patient numbers utilising the ministerial licence. That indicates that the current MCAP is overly restrictive. The patients then accessing the ministerial licence work tirelessly with their medical professionals in completing what is called the ministerial licence. There are issues with the scheme, however, and the main one that I want to point to is the fact that the patients get no financial assistance. Can I say, I suppose, that medical cannabis would be by no means cheap for patients who are trying to obtain treatment. So I say to the Minister that the numbers speak for themselves on this matter. In light of these findings, I believe it's imperative. These numbers are not just statistics, they are a testament to the urgent need for reform and the voices of patients calling for change.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Thanks, Deputy, for your question. You raised 2 distinct issues which I shall address in order. So the MCAP review. The Medical Cannabis Access Programme is operated by the Primary Care Reimbursement Service of the HSE and is a statutory programme to enable clinicians and patients access prescribed cannabis-based products for the treatment of 3 specified conditions as specified in the HPRA's 2017 report, Cannabis for Medical Use, a Scientific Review, which was commissioned by the Minister for Health. The 3 conditions are, which you've said, spasticity associated with multiple sclerosis resistant to all standard therapies and interventions while under expert medical supervision. intractable nausea and vomiting associated with chemotherapy, despite the use of standard antiemetic regimes whilst under expert medical supervision. Severe treatment-resistant epilepsy that has failed to respond to standard anticonvulsant medications whilst under expert medical supervision. The Misuse of Drugs Regulations 2019 set out the legal provision for the operation of the Medical Cannabis Access Programme and the legal obligations for healthcare professionals and commercial operators. The MCAP commenced in late 21 and to date, as you've said, 55 patients have been treated under the programme. The MCAP was scheduled for a 5-year pilot programme subject. However, the Minister for Health brought the review forward given the passage of time, and the Health Research Board was engaged to carry out the initial evidence gathering and subsequent synthesis for a presentation to a clinical review group that will make recommendations to the Minister as to whether or not evidence exists to expand the range of products covered by the programme. Currently, officials in the Department of Health are working on setting up the clinical review group. In relation to the ministerial licence patients, the ministerial licence programme enables clinicians with a licence issued pursuant to Section 14 of the Misuse of Drugs Act treat patients with cannabis products. The programme predates the MCAP, the first licence being issued in late 2016. To date, 362 ministerial licences have been issued for the treatment of 77 separate patients. There are currently 27 patients availing of the programme. All patients currently avail of cannabis-based products manufactured by a pharmacy in the Netherlands. Having initially been set up by the Department of Health during the pandemic, the Primary Care Reimbursement Service of the HSE operates a monthly service whereby the products are collected from the Netherlands, they're transported to Ireland and delivered to patients' homes directly. This applies to all patients. For those patients treated under the licence programme for one of the 3 stated conditions covered by the MCAP, the PCRS directly pays the dispensing pharmacy in the Netherlands on receipt of an invoice. Patients treated for other conditions must meet the cost of the products themselves.
Garmalgatha Ara, and I appreciate the new statistics of 362. That's very positive. I just want to say that. Look, I had a particular case where they reached out to me. They had applied through the ministerial licence, and I know that Minister Donnelly would be very familiar with the case because I've submitted a number of PQs on the matter. And what's come to light is that because the consultant is the one who completes the ministerial licence application, they are then deemed the application, or the applicant, sorry. So the department will only engage with them. So this particular case, the application was submitted on the 7th of December 2023 last year. So that's over 5 months, and I have it through PQ Response that they expect that the consultant would hear back from the department within a matter of days. So something's seriously gone wrong in this particular case, and the consultant has had to submit a complaint to ascertain what is going on there. The patient themselves is actually seen as a third party and can't get access to any information whatsoever. So I just wanted to highlight that again on the floor of the chamber, just to hopefully get them their answer. I do want to also point in my last few seconds to the HRB research. They recently reviewed existing medical cannabis research and found evidence to support the prescription of cannabis for the conditions that are already approved, which is fantastic. But they also point to there being evidence now to support nerve pain, especially occurring in those with conditions of MS, diabetes and spinal cord injuries, for which, that's very positive, and I applaud them for bringing this to light. I do want to point out, though, that this report is at odds with a previous HRB study from 2016 that also found evidence that medical cannabis in some forms does have at least moderate efficacy in treating sleep disorders, stimulating appetite, chemotherapy as a whole, fibromyalgia, PTSD and some Parkinson's diseases as well. There's evidence for treatment for dementia and a list of other conditions here that I don't have time to, but I'm just hoping that this review will, number one, take account of the number of different conditions that have been approved under ministerial licence, and also the recent research that has been done on the area.
Thanks, Deputy Gorvmahago Cahirlock. Deputy, as I stated earlier, the Department of Health is currently, this is in relation to the MCAP review, is currently establishing a clinical review group to review the publication in order to make recommendations to the Minister for Health. But in response to an oral parliamentary question last week here in the House, the Minister stated that he would be open to any expansions if recommended, but that he'd be entirely led by the clinicians in the group. In relation to the ministerial licence that you spoke to, that specific case, in order to ascertain which patients are eligible to have their products funded, PCRS would review whether the person met the clinical criteria and advise that the patient can be supported for reimbursement. Situations where the HSE considered reimbursement support appropriate for patients assessing cannabis products from the Netherlands, the following steps were taken. The patient's consultant was satisfied that all therapeutic options were exhausted and were prepared to accept the responsibility of monitoring the patient's response to the cannabis product. A prescriber, the person authorising to supply for a patient to a person entitled to dispense, applied to the Minister for a ministerial licence. That is, there is a ministerial licence in place. A copy of the licence should be enclosed with the application. The consultant completed an individual reimbursement form such that the therapeutic benefits for the patient is described, and only applications that are in line with the clinical guidance on cannabis for medical use that is published on the Department of Health website were considered. And as we spoke about them already, the spasticity associated with multiple sclerosis, intractable nausea and vomiting associated with chemotherapy, and the severe refractory epilepsy. Anything outside of these indications are not supported. But I do believe if you want to send on the details of that to Minister Donnelly's office, they will certainly have a look at it for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next,